Hello and welcome to a week 3 waiver wire discussion. My name is Adam Levitan, joined each and every week for this show by Sam Sherman, our waivers specialist here at establishtheRun.com. Sam, how's it going today?
I'm doing great, Adam. Last week we absolutely smashed on the waiver wire. Puka Nacua, Kyron Williams look like, I don't know, maybe that's a hot take, but to me they're looking like top 24 players at their position for the rest of the season. We called them out as top waiver wire ads last week, so excited to go through it again this week and see if we can uncover some more gold on the waiver wire.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it was, too unique or anything to have Puka and Kyron Williams as awesome pickups. The question was how much of your fab to blow on them. And I went nuclear. I was just like, in my leagues, I was like, man, let me just get these guys. I don't feel like dealing with a bunch of these other dust balls we're going to get all year. These are two of the best guys that we'll possibly get all year. Did not think Cam Akers would get cut, but here we are. Anyways, that's in the past. We're looking forward. This was shaping up to be a relatively, I think, weak week on the wire. Maybe not a great one until last night's devastating Nick Chubb injury. Now the question is, Sam, how much should we blow on Jerome Ford? I'm not going to get Jerome Ford. I have no money left in any spots. If I did, though, it strikes me as an empty the clip situation on Jerome Ford. Yes, there is a threat that they sign someone. Yes, I think they will sign someone. But I have some takes on Jerome Ford that I can get off my chest here. But I'll first go to you, Sam. How aggressive do you think people should be on Jerome Ford this week?
Yeah, I'm willing to be very aggressive on Ford. You know, if you're in these leagues where you're allowed to make $0 bids, meaning there's not that much of a downside of actually using all of your fab, I'm comfortable going, 80-90% of your fab that's remaining. Look, I just think we don't get too many of these spots each year where the number one running back goes down, is confirmed out for the season, and the team has a very clear number two running back. And I think that's the case in Cleveland with Jerome Ford. They trusted him all offseason. He even, tweaked his hamstring pretty badly in the preseason. They still didn't make any major moves. They didn't bring back Kareem Hunt. They didn't bring in Leonard Fournette. They traded, a late pick for Pierre Strong. But besides that, the team has been very committed to Jerome Ford as a number two running back in Cleveland. That showed in the snap shares and touch shares last night after Chubb went down. Ford absolutely dominated the touches, and he shined on those touches. He broke off a really nice 69-yard run on his in the second half there. So, man, I'm willing to be aggressive on Ford. I think, again, if your league allows $0 bids, I think, I'm giving you permission to basically use as much fab as you think you need to acquire Ford. I think he's going to be one of the best waiver wire pickups of the year.
We were high on Jerome Ford in the preseason process because they showed no sign whatsoever of trying to replace Kareem Hunt out of house. I mean, they didn't even make Jerome Ford compete for the running back 2 job. That first preseason game, Jerome Ford didn't even play in it because he had already won the running back 2 job. They didn't even make him compete for it. So I think they really, really like this guy. Again, I think they will add someone, but Jerome Ford can play, and he has the faith of this team. And this is an awesome run blocking offensive line, an awesome run scheme. Would you add Pierre Strong at all, Sam? My take is that Pierre Strong only got that touchdown because Jerome Ford was out of gas, and they're going to add someone. I think they still see Pierre Strong as mainly a special teams player. But in the deeper league, I could see a bid on Pierre Strong. Any thoughts there?
Yeah, so the touches and snaps kind of broke out like 80%, 90% to Ford, 20% to Strong last night after Chubb went down. So again, I do think this is going to be Ford's backfield. That said, in some of these deeper leagues, just getting a guy who is now, I think we have to say now he is the favorite to be the number two. That's valuable in a lot of these deeper leagues. So I am adding Strong in deeper leagues, but I do share some of the concerns that you have. I do think there is some risk the team brings in a Hunt and Fournette and doesn't make those guys. I'm not worried about that for Ford, but I'm slightly worried about that for Pierre Strong as terms of him being the number two.
Agreed. Okay. More running back injuries. Saquon Barkley goes down in that game with an ankle injury against Arizona. Varying reports right now on the severity of it. The initial report was it's a regular sprain, not high ankle. He'll be out around 3 weeks. Then it comes out today he's doing better than expected and has a chance to play as soon as Thursday. I do not buy that, but the fact that it's at least possible makes me think that Saquon will be back sooner rather than later. On top of that, it's not that clean here. I mean, I think Breida, Brightwell, the rookie that they have are all in play. They could also give Paris Campbell a carry or two. They could also give Jalen Hyatt a carry or two. So I'm not like falling all over myself here to get a Giants running back. We have Matt Breida here as the best option. What do you think priority is on Matt Breida or any other Giants running backs right now?
Yeah, I think Breida is a good add off the wire this week, but I do have him ranked behind the likes of Zach Moss, Justice Hill, and Ford, who we just talked about. And the reasoning for that is, yeah, it's not super clear cut. We don't have a ton of data on what the Giants will do without Saquon Barkley. We did see last year in week 18 with Barkley resting and Tyrod Taylor at quarterback, the Giants were forced to use Breida and Gary Brightwell as their only running backs in that game. The snaps broke out in 70% in favor of Matt Breida, though Gary Brightwell did outcarry Matt Breida in that game. Breida, again, in that game had 7 catches, so he owned pretty clearly the pass down role. So kind of using that data point to project forward, I do kind of expect like a 60 to 40% committee in favor of Breida, with pretty even on base rushing, but Breida earning the third down, the passing down work, which I think is more valuable. I think maybe a comp is, in how you can think of that, is sort of like how Justice Hill and Gus Edwards broke out last week, with Breida sort of in that Justice Hill slight 1A lead role for the Giants. But again, with Barkley's injury timeline maybe not being as long as we initially thought, it's not someone I'm willing to spend a ton off the wire, just because you maybe only get to start him for a couple weeks, and he's probably more of like a running back 3 during those weeks you get to start him, not really running back 1 or even high end RB2. So yeah, I'm kind of in the middle on Breida. I'd recommend sort of in the range of 10 to 20% ish in terms of fab.
Okay. Yeah, I agree with that take for sure. And I'd for sure rather have Justice Hill or maybe even Gus Edwards. Now, Justice Hill out-snapped, out-opportunityed, out-routed Gus Edwards. Gus Edwards did get the touchdown here, but the usage, I think, in the first game without J.K. Dobbins was roughly as expected. Justice Hill, a better fit for the Todd Monken offense here. What did you think of Justice Hill's first game as the quote-unquote lead back along with Gus Edwards? And I should note, there were people who were like, oh, Melvin Gordon's going to play. Like, the old running backs, guys, Dalvin, like, it's over for these guys. Melvin Gordon played 0 snaps in this game behind Justice Hill and Gus Edwards.
Yeah, it was encouraging to see. It was just a 2-man backfield between those guys. And yeah, it's sort of what I expected. Gus Edwards barely misses this list. I think you could group him with some of these wide receivers I have at the end here. I think he's also a fine add this week. But Justice Hill is a guy playing on passing downs, and he also earned 3 goal line carries to Gus Edwards 1. So even though Gus Edwards did convert that touchdown, he is not owning the goal line role 100%. They're using Justice Hill a bit more. If you look at some fantasy expected points models, Hayden Winks does one for running backs, and Justice Hill basically doubled up Gus Edwards in expected points last week. Again, that can kind of be volatile week to week. I wouldn't say Hill's role is 2 times bigger than Gus Edwards, but he does have the bigger role, in my opinion, and he is a priority in the Ravens backfield to add if those guys are still available.
One of the things I got wrong, one of the many things I got wrong last week, was Deion Jackson not playing at all. Deion Jackson and Jake Funk for the Indianapolis Colts combined for 0, I repeat, 0 snaps. Zach Moss comes in and plays on 56 of 57 snaps in a game that Anthony Richardson left early. I honestly did not see this coming from Zach Moss. I mean, if they're going to use him like this, and we don't know what Jonathan Taylor's status is, Zach Moss is going to be very, very viable here, especially with Anthony Richardson opening up so many rushing lanes in the RPO stuff. What do you think about Zach Moss and Colts backfield, Sam?
Yeah. First off, I just want to say, everyone this offseason who's telling me the workhorse running back is dead, I want you to look at Zach Moss's role in week 2 this week. And
Kyren Williams was in for 76 of 80 snaps.
And McCaffrey. I mean, there's a bunch of these guys, James Conner, there's a bunch of these guys that are kind of getting in the workhorse roles. That's a topic for another day, but I do think that is kind of interesting that we do seem to be shifting maybe back towards teams preferring that. But anyways, small sample. Let's talk about the Colts backfield. going forward. I do think this Zach Moss role is awesome, and at least in the short term, it's here to stay. Evan Hull has a pretty serious knee injury. He's on IR. I don't think he's coming back for quite a while. And then Jonathan Taylor, man, there's a lot of uncertainty about to what extent Taylor comes back this year with the Colts, if he needs to be traded to play this year, if he's willing to play for the Colts. So I'm cautiously optimistic on Zach Moss. That's why I have him ranked above Breda. I sort of feel better about his role, and I feel even a little bit better about him having a chance to, serve in a lead back role throughout the entire season. So yeah, I'm cautiously optimistic. I put, sort of a 15 to 25% fab recommendation. At the end of the day, this Colts backfield is not going to be one that's creating a ton of running back fantasy points. That's because Anthony Richardson, even though he opens up rushing lanes for his running backs, he's going to vulture a ton of the goal line touchdowns, and he's not going to check down much. But man, you can't argue too much with like 56 of 57 offensive snaps. Moss is still certainly worth rostering, and that makes him, a top 3 waiver wire out in the week.
And I mean, and also the Colts are playing at the fastest pace in the league. It's a little bit, similar. I understand that Jalen Hurts scored a ton of tush push last year and didn't check down. Miles Sanders still had a really, really nice year. It's not out of the question to think Zach Moss can have some version of that, obviously in a worse offense with a worse quarterback. There's one other running back on here that I wanted to mention personally that is not on this list, and that is Kendry Miller. I mean, I think it's clear. People hated when I said it, but Jamal Williams is not it. I mean, if not for the touchdowns last year, Jamal Williams never would have gotten paid. The touchdowns were so fluky. Amon-Ra kept getting pushed out at the 1-yard line. Guy can't play. Now he's a hamstring injury. Tony Jones is like a borderline NFL player. Alvin Kamara is still suspended, was declining last year. Kendry Miller seemed like he was close to coming back. So for people in deeper leagues, I think Kendry Miller is a really, really interesting ad to see what develops there in the Saints backfield. Some other deeper league ads that we have on here. Devon A-Chain at least was active, did not play very much, even though Salvon Ahmed left with injury. So that's a little scary, but he's at least worth considering now that he is at least active. Any other deeper league stuff at running back you want to mention, Sam?
Yeah, the Craig Reynolds thing is worth mentioning with Montgomery likely out a couple weeks. I do think Reynolds is going to own the goal line, sort of short yardage stuff in Detroit. That's what we saw when Montgomery exited last week. So deeper leagues, he's worth an ad. And then there's just a couple guys, like nothing changed for them last week. It's not really like sexy or exciting to talk about, but Tyjae Spears, Chuba Hubbard, and Ty Chandler, in my opinion, are all just clear running back 2s on their teams. And we saw what happened, right? If the starter goes down, some of these guys could be near the top of the waiver wire column in future weeks. So yeah, I'm not completely cutting bait on some of these guys, clear running back 2s in their own teams. I think those guys are always worth adding off the waiver wire running back.
One wide receiver I think that's going to be popular this week is Tank Dell. Tank Dell is undersized, but dude was awesome in college, like jump off the screen. I thought he was pretty good in preseason, and he's been productive on his routes here. Noah Brown was inactive for this game for the Texans, giving Tank Dell a little bit more of an opportunity. I will say on Tank Dell, I think the Colts perimeter corners may be the worst in the entire NFL, and this pass defense may be one of the worst in the entire NFL. And so I know CJ Stroud came in and shredded them in somewhat garbage-ish time. So I'm not going overboard on Tank Dell, but I do think it's at least worth considering. What do you think about that one, Sam?
Yeah, I like the Tank Dell ad quite a bit this week. He makes my list of top 10 ads. I mean, one thing that jumps out to me is he led the team in targets. It was Nico Collins that had the bigger day, but Tank Dell actually ran more routes than Nico Collins. He had one more target. He also earned a carry. I think this usage is pretty good, and I don't see Noah Brown earning this rollback once he comes back from IR. So I feel pretty good going forward, projecting Tank Dell to at least be playing in 3 wide receiver sets with Robert Woods and Nico Collins. And like you said, man, the college production numbers for Tank Dell are off the charts. 2 straight seasons, his sophomore and junior years at Houston, going over 1,300 yards, over 12 touchdowns. The dude can really play. He was obviously discounted in the draft because he is tiny, like Tutu Atwell, tiny. But man, it seems like he can play a little bit. And even though the Colts defense is likely to be bad, I'm cautiously optimistic that CJ Stroud could produce some fantasy goodness this year for his wide receivers. So I like Tank Dell in sort of the 5% fab range where he's available.
Yeah, one other guy I just want to mention on here before we move on is Roschon Johnson. Again, Deontay Foreman was a healthy scratch on Sunday. It's just a sign to me that they want to go to a two-man backfield. And I think probably Khalil Herbert is better served in that change of pace role that he had last year. And if they put him back in that role and give Roschon Johnson more of the David Montgomery role from last year, I know the Bears are dumpster fire right now, but that's pretty valuable. So I might actually add Roschon ahead of Matt Breida for me. I think that one's close, but yeah, I do want to have Roschon on my team there. I see everyone has questions in chat. We're going to get to the questions at the end. I do want to get to some drop candidates, though, Sam. Carlos had a question about Justin Fields possibly getting dropped. I agree that he does not look like he's know what he's doing with the football. I agree. He's like one of the worst real-life NFL quarterbacks. There's no way I'd be dropping Justin Fields in fantasy. He is going to start running again. I think we saw last year, they kind of like sometime around, I don't know, October, he started running like a madman, and I think they'll get back to that and start playing to his strengths a little bit more as they devolve into a dumpster fire. But yeah, drop list here, I think, is really dependent on how deep your team is and stuff, like how deep your league is, how deep your bench is. Do you have IR spots, etc.? But yeah, just any help for people on drops here, Sam, generally.
Again, yeah, it's really important to add the context to this list. Like Quentin Johnson might jump out here, and some people might freak out seeing him on the drop list. But man, I'm in some like 12-team leagues with 15 roster spots, and I can't justify keeping Quentin Johnson when I can add Jerome Ford, when I can add Josh Kelly, some of these guys. So, in shallower leagues, I've kind of seen enough at this point. Josh Palmer is pretty firmly ahead of Johnson. I'm okay dropping him in shallower leagues. And then it's just a bunch of these boring veteran wide receivers that didn't pan out. You can make the case for Adam Thielen. He looked okay last night, but some of these other guys, I'd say Thielen's the best on this list. Like Gallup, completely cuttable. He's playing this impossible outside role and not earning targets. Juju is kind of buried. Lazard with Zach Wilson. Van Jefferson's going to be buried, win cup returns. Like these guys are firmly cuttable. And then again, the running backs, again, very league dependent. Like Elijah Mitchell, the reason he's cuttable is because maybe we thought in shallower leagues he had some standalone role. The fact that he has no standalone role, at least he hasn't over the first couple of weeks, means the likes of Tyjae Spears, Chuba Hubbard, I think are slightly more rosterable than Elijah Mitchell. But in your deeper leagues, he is still the handcuff to McCaffrey. So, I'm not cutting him in 18, 19, 20 roster spot leagues.
Right, exactly. And like, if you guys follow me on Twitter at Adam Levitan, shout out to me. I tweeted a article today that I actually believe. Kyle Shanahan was like, yeah, we messed up. Christian McCaffrey can't be touching the ball this much. Eli Mitchell needs to play more. They are in a short week this week. I actually think Eli Mitchell is going to get 8, 9, 10 touches this week on Thursday night against the Giants. But yeah, I mean, it's hard to keep these guys if you're in a shallowish type home league. The other one is Adam Thielen, who you mentioned. I mean, I think Adam Thielen sucks at this point in his career. I also think he's going to catch 80 balls this year, 85 balls, just like these short, ugly ones. And so if that is helpful to your roster, I think that's at least worth considering there. But yeah, a lot of this stuff is so league dependent.
Yeah.
Let's go to some deeper league targets here. Sam, anyone on this list you want to point out that you think is an interesting ad for my deep league brothers or sisters?
Yeah. A couple. Let's start with some wide receivers. The two most interesting to me this week in deeper leagues are Devontae Parker and Josh Downs. Starting with Parker, he came back from injury to immediately be the Patriots wide receiver that ran the most routes, earned the most targets. Again, I don't think he's some awesome player, but he kind of had this role last year on a team that I think was worse on offense last year than the Patriots are going to be this year. And he still produced some big spike weeks. So teams that are really wide receiver needy, you might need him as a flex starter through the bye weeks. I think you could do worse than a full-time player in Devontae Parker. Then maybe a more interesting guy to talk about is Josh Downs in terms of a breakout archetype. He has out-targeted Alec Pierce in back-to-back weeks. And I know he had really strong college production. Some of the prospect film guys like Matt Harmon, who does an awesome stuff with wide receiver charting, was really in on Down. So he's an interesting talent to me. I think he could eventually surpass Alec Pierce in 2 wide receiver sets. And I think this Colts passing attack is just going to have more volume and more pass attempts than we were projecting. So if you can get the Colts, number 2 behind Michael Pittman, I think that's a pretty good bench stash in deeper leagues. But yeah, I'll stop there. And then let me know if you have thoughts on those guys, Adam. Then maybe we can hit on some of the running backs on this list.
Yeah, I mean, my point was going to be about running backs, and I'm actually curious how you think about this. I saw a comment here. I just wanted to use as an example. Let me see if I can find it here. Sorry for anyone that's just listening. We're not servicing the audio listeners, but for the video listeners, a question from CM here. He says, not a question. He says, pour one out for me. I dropped Jerome Ford for Tank Dell before kickoff on Sunday. Big RIP. So look, I'm not saying this was a mistake. I'm curious actually what Sam thinks. My take on my bench for season-long leagues is to have contingent RB value on it. Guys who are one injury away from actually exploding. The way you build a super team in season-long is to have stud wide receivers and stud quarterback and stud tight end, hopefully, and then run into this running back injury where you get a guy like Jerome Ford or Kieran Williams or Josh Kelly or something, and then you have an absolute super team because Jerome Ford is going to produce at a weaker rate than Nick Chubb, but still produce at a pretty good rate. So I don't think I would have made this move, even though I really do like Tank Dell. It's just Tank Dell on the waivers. That stuff happens every week. There's someone like Tank Dell on waivers, it seems like. And so the guys who are one injury away from actually giving me a league winner, I don't want to drop. And so I think that fits with this discussion about drops and deeper leagues. I'm not saying that's the right take, but that's my take. Sam, what do you think about how you think generally running back versus wide receiver on your bench?
Yeah, I think I'm generally aligned with where you are. I do think a slight adjustment I've made in recent years is like being open to the wide receiver breakouts off the waiver wire. Like I actually heard that argument last week for Puka, like saying, "Oh, should I really spend 60% of fab on Puka? I usually use my fab on running backs." I got that comment a lot. And I was saying, man, we 15 targets, like you got to be open to the breakout off the waiver wire from the wide receiver. It's maybe slightly more rare than running back. But again, Adam, I think it really comes down to your individual roster construction. Like clearly CM, this commenter, he had a terrible run out here, but if he was stacked at running back and needed a wide receiver to start, maybe he drafted Christian Watson and Cooper Kupp and some of these guys that got injured. I can't say this is necessarily a terrible move. I'd have to, look at his roster before he made this, but it really is about sort of rounding out your depth at different positions. I generally lean towards keeping the running backs on my bench over the wide receivers for the contingent upside. But some of these, rookie breakout bets that are available on the waiver wire, I also do want to be aggressive on. So it's a bit of a nuanced debate there. Oh, Adam, I think you're muted.
You guys can go ahead and start getting questions in. We have about 10 minutes or so. We'll take as many questions as we possibly can. I think this is an interesting one to think about. Kenny Gainwell still viable after DeAndre Swift's performance? I assume that Zach here is thinking about dropping Kenny Gainwell. That is not something I think I would do, but it's certainly scary given how well DeAndre Swift played. Sam, how would you be handling Kenny Gainwell if you had him right now?
Yeah, that one is tough. He's definitely not a drop for me. I'm certainly holding him. If I was to project rest of the season who I'd rather have, I would rather have DeAndre Swift at this point. But I think Gainwell's very clearly the number 2 there. They're not very excited about Penny. Boston Scott is banged up, so yeah, I'm certainly keeping Gainwell.
Marvin Mims thing is interesting. Zach Rabb says Marvin Mims was dropped in my league. How would you rank Marvin Mims versus the options here? I want to be clear. Marvin Mims ran 6, count them, 6 routes on Sunday. That was behind Brandon Johnson and Little Jordan Humphrey. He had 2 catches for 113 yards and a touchdown on those 6 routes. You would think that leads to him playing a lot more, but I don't want to put anything past Sean Payton here. So how would you rank Marvin Mims for some of the guys that we have here? And maybe we can go back to the home league screen too.
Yeah. I can go back to the home league. In deeper leagues, Marvin Mims is owned everywhere. Yeah. So I have him a bit lower than you might expect when you look at that box score. Again, it's just due to the routes. I do think he's going to overtake Little Jordan Humphrey and Brandon Johnson. He also got 2 carries when he was in the game last week. So they clearly wanted to get him the ball when he was in the game, which is a good sign. That said, though, man, is he going to overtake Sutton or Judy? I'm pretty skeptical of that. And then we're talking about the third option on a Russell Wilson passing attack. That's just not been that exciting of a position to target over the past couple of years. So I have him below the likes of Josh Downs, Josh Reynolds, Romeo Doubs. But again, like this stuff is nuanced. If you're just looking for a pure upside bet I would take Marvin Mims like over Josh Reynolds. If you're looking for someone that you need to start in the next couple weeks, it's pretty clearly Reynolds over Mims for me. So make that call based on your own team and what type of bet you're looking for.
I think Josh Reynolds is actually pretty solid. I mean, Marvin Jones can't play. They don't want to expand Khalif Raymond role. Dave Montgomery's out. They're gonna have to use Jahmyr Gibbs more as a runner. I mean, I think Josh Reynolds is pretty interesting, especially when they play at home. Tank Dell or Robert Woods in full PPR for you, Sim?
I'm going Tank Dell. Just based off his production last week, he was pretty even with Woods in routes. I like the upside of the rookie over the veteran.
Matt says drop Tank Bigsby for Zach Moss. I actually talked about this with Silva today. I wouldn't want to drop Tank Bigsby, but if I had to, I'm okay with it. I think they want to expand Travis Etienne's role in a big way, and he is like 5-1, 6-1 in snaps over everyone else in Jacksonville's backfield. However, if something were to happen to Travis Etienne, obviously Tank Bigsby would look very, very good. But I think you got to have Zach Moss over Tank Bigsby at this point. Sam, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree with that. And the other sort of chink in Tank Bigsby's armor is that Jonas Johnson mixed in last week. So it's less clear cut now that he is like this alpha contingent smash play if Etienne goes down. I think they're like losing slight faith in him. Yes. But I agree with you. I don't want to drop Bigsby, but I prefer Moss to him.
Elijah Mitchell or Elijah Moore? Which one would you drop? Elijah Mitchell or Elijah Moore? I thought Elijah Moore was set up for a big game last night until Amari Cooper played. What do you think about this one, Sam? Who would you rather drop?
Man, this one's close, but I think I would rather drop Elijah Mitchell. Moore's role looks pretty solid. He's earning targets at a good clip. It hasn't translated yet, but I'm still holding out a little bit of faith in the Cleveland passing attack. And again, we can talk about Elijah Mitchell's role increasing, but it was literally 0 snaps last week. So I think I still prefer Elijah Moore.
Yeah, that's fair. I am worried about Deshaun Watson. I mean, he has not played good football in 2 years or something, or 3 years. Yeah. I mean, something insane. And so he has not been good at all, which scares me. Maybe they lean into the pass a little bit more though, now that Nick Chubb is down. I'd probably drop Elijah Mitchell here, but I want to see what happens on Thursday with Elijah Mitchell, ideally, and how much he plays.
Yeah. And again, just 42 of 50 routes for Elijah Moore, 9 targets last night. Those are just very good numbers. He's a guy whose talent we still somewhat believe in, or maybe some of us believe in it. So I'm not cutting bait on him quite yet.
I see a lot of trade questions in here. We are doing the rest of season top 150 rankings right now. The team is working on them. We're all going to go over them and publish them either tonight or tomorrow morning. And then we'll have a rest of season top 150 show where you can get in trade questions. Kyle says thoughts on Jonathan Mingo as a stash. Looking at Carolina, it looks nice for him. Looking at Carolina's schedule, it looks nice for him. I didn't think Mingo looked good. And I think that Bryce Young has a lot of faith in Adam Thielen right now. So I don't really love Mingo as a stash here, but he is a rookie wide receiver. Sam, any thoughts on him?
Yeah. I have him at the very end of this list here. Again, I agree with you. He didn't look good, but 38 of 39 routes and earned 8 targets for over a 25% share in that game. So that's still very good peripherals. It doesn't really look like he's getting open, and those targets aren't worth much at the moment. But man, these rookie quarterbacks can get better over the second half of the season. So I'm holding out some hope for Mingo in deeper leagues as a sort of a deeper league stash.
Germ says he's trying to put in claims for Roshan, Jerome Ford, and Stroud and Nico. How we prioritize them. Ford clearly number 1 for me, then probably Nico, then Roshan, then Stroud. But any takes on that order, Sim?
Yeah, same order. If he's also asking who of these guys to cut of Brandon Cooks, Elijah Mitchell, Devon Achane, and Kadarius Toney, I would probably cut Achane first, then Mitchell, then Toney, then Cooks. But those are, again, these questions are tough because it seems like none of those guys are cuttable in my leagues, but I know you got to make these tough decisions. So that's how I'd probably rank it.
Jared says, can he drop Rashad Penny? I actually talked about this today with Silva. I think yes. I think there's something wrong with Rashad Penny, even with Boston Scott going out with a concussion and Kenny Gainwell not active. Rashad Penny played 7 snaps in that game on Thursday. Remember, he broke his leg last year. Something just seems off with the whole Rashad Penny thing. So yes, I think you can drop Rashad Penny.
Yeah. I'm seeing someone say, just expanding on Penny, someone's asking drop Penny for Latavius Murray. That's like pretty down bad for my best ball shares this offseason. But man, I think I would do that, honestly, just because I think Latavius Murray, he's someone I actually wanted to touch on this list. Like, he's out snapping, he's out routing, he's out touching Damian Harris now. I think he is the Buffalo contingent upside play. I think if James Cook goes down, Murray is the more capable route runner, pass catcher, pass blocker than Damian Harris. So, man, I think Penny's fourth in the depth chart and Latavius Murray is second. So I think I would prefer Murray to Penny. I don't know if you're willing to go that far at him, but that's how I'd have it ranked.
Yeah, no, I think that's totally fair. I mean, something is way off with Rashad Penny right now. Couple questions on Quentin Johnston. He played the fifth most snaps on the Chargers this week. Now, we've seen this before. Like last year at this time, Kenneth Walker was not playing at all for Seattle, and he came out and was a league winner down the stretch. First round, second round rookies who I think have talent, I do not want to drop. I understand people are going to get into spots where maybe they have to, but I'd try to stash Quentin Johnston still. Any thoughts on him, Sam?
Yeah. Again, if you have the roster space to stash him, I still like him. Some leagues where I have him, I want to hold on to him. But again, not to be a broken record, but if you're holding on to him at the expense of guys like Jerome Ford, Zach Moss, I think you're doing it wrong. He's a guy you can cut and monitor his snap count, and in 2 and 3 weeks, maybe pick up for free again. Like, I don't think your league mates are, clamoring to get Quentin Johnston off the waiver wire in most shallow leagues if you cut him.
We've gone this long without talking about Kadarius Toney, which is everyone's favorite topic. Would you drop Kadarius Toney for Tank Dell? It was the same story with Kadarius Toney. He played, I believe he ran 15 routes, and he saw 5 targets on those routes. They are clearly love scheming him the ball. They do not rely on him to play a full complement of snaps. I don't know that changes. Maybe it does. Sam, any thoughts on Toney or Tank Dell the rest of the season?
Oof. I probably would hold Toney there, but it's very close. Man, I'm just skeptical of the Toney thing. Like, we do this every week for the past 10 weeks. Like, it's like, oh man, Kadarius Toney's targets per route run on his 9 routes was so impressive. But it's like, man, those targets are screens. Like, a lot of them aren't legitimate wide receiver routes, and I'm just skeptical he can scale that to a full workload. That said, like, who else is going to do it on the Chiefs? Like, I don't know. So I probably would still prefer the upside case of Toney to Tank Dell, but I think that one is very, very close, and I wouldn't, blame people for going with Tank Dell in that spot.
I think Keith has a fair question. I mean, we could just gloss over Rashad Bateman, but dude is not playing well and not earning targets right now. We do have him behind Tank Dell, Tutu, and Jaden Reed, which is a fall from grace for Rashad Bateman. There's a lot of Rashad Bateman fans out there, man. I mean, that think the dude can really play. There's just a lot of target competition there now, in my opinion. And it sounds like Odell's injury is not that serious. So, yeah. What do you think about Bateman rest of season, Sam?
Yeah, this one is kind of just like, I know the reports right now are that like Beckham's injury is not a big deal, but I'm like a little skeptical of, given his age, that he's not going to miss at least 1 or 2 weeks due to this. Like, he missed the entire second half of the game. So this is just a bet on Bateman, whether OBJ is out or limited, gets an expanded role next week and can capitalize on it. I know he has not looked great for the first 2 weeks, but man, he had over 2.2 yards per route run last year to start the season when the offense was really cooking before he got injured. Former first round pick, Lamar called him the wide receiver 1 this offseason. Again, I am certainly updating my priors on Bateman, having him ranked below Atwell, Reed, and these guys, but he's still an upside bet for me that with his OBJ injury, maybe he gets a chance to show it a little bit in the next couple of weeks and can maintain that role.
Robert says, would you rather drop AJ Dillon or Cam Akers? Now, unlike Kareem Hunt and Leonard Fournette, I actually do think Cam Akers is going to get a job. But one guy's in the NFL and has been a pretty reasonably good player or decent player in the NFL. One guy is not in the NFL. And when these teams cut these older hurt running backs like Melvin Gordon, like Dalvin Cook, I mean, people are so obsessed with the name. And so I think it's AJ Dillon. I'd rather have AJ Dillon than Cam Akers here. But any thoughts, Sam?
Yeah, I'm not the world's biggest AJ Dillon fan, but it's still AJ Dillon over Akers. I mean, Akers is healthy scratched until something changes, and AJ Dillon is a starting running back on a team until something changes. So give me the starting running back.
Jay Greenberg says, are we holding on to Jeff Wilson still? Raheem Mostert was certainly awesome on Sunday night. Any thoughts on stashes? And by the way, there was another injury stash I thought was interesting. Obviously, Jameson Williams is one. Jeff Wilson was another one. And there was another one that somebody asked about.
Keaton Mitchell, is that maybe one?
Yeah, Keaton Mitchell, the running back for the Ravens, if you're in a super deep league, is an interesting IR stash also. Any thoughts on IR stashes?
Yeah, I mean, in my leagues that have IR spots, it doesn't like cost you a roster spot basically to hold these guys. So I am stashing Jeff Wilson in leagues where an IR spot exists. In leagues that don't have an IR spot, it's like a bit of a tougher sell for me to keep him over some of these guys on the running back list. Like I'd prefer Kendra, I'd prefer A-Chain, I prefer Tank Bigsby, etc. But in leagues with an IR spot, he's like maybe one of the best uses of that IR spot at this point. So yeah. Adam, you're muted again.
Let's keep it moving here. Would you drop DJ Chark to bring Gainwell back off IR? This Panthers offense, man, like I do not have high hopes for a player like DJ Chark in this offense. He needs to get down the field. Offensive line isn't good enough. Bryce Young isn't good enough. So yeah, Gainwell over Chark for me for sure.
Yeah. This one's not even close. I mean, Terrace Marshall, I think, was eating into Chark's role a big chunk last week too. So it's ugly for DJ Chark right now.
All right, breaking news into the show here live. Kareem Hunt is currently visiting the Cleveland Browns. Adam Schefter is reporting again. Kareem Hunt is visiting the Browns. We know that Kareem Hunt was with the Browns last year, played behind Nick Chubb, but obviously knows the system, knows the team, would be a seamless fit back in. I think there was a reason they could have signed Kareem Hunt this entire time. Kareem Hunt was out there this entire time. They could have brought him back. They didn't. They wanted to go with Jerome Ford. However, now that Nick Chubb is out, how much do you think a Kareem Hunt signing would affect how you think about Jerome Ford here?
Yeah, I mean, at the margins, it affects it. Like, I'm not going to be one of those people that says it has zero impact if you were to sign on the Browns. I think he's a bit more of a threat than Pierre Strong is, just because of his history with the team, his historical performance. But man, I am still super excited about Ford. Maybe you think you can get him at a lower price now if people are worried about Hunt, but I think that Jerome Ford is just a better player at this point in his career. Hunt's efficiency last year really fell off a cliff. Again, a lot of teams had a chance to sign him, teams that were desperate for running backs like the Colts, and they chose not to. So I am not overly worried. I'm not really updating my Ford bids too much based on this news.
I might reduce a bid that I had on Ford by like 5 or 10%, I think is okay. Because Jerome Ford is not going to be like every down.
No.
If Kareem Hunt signs, whereas if Pierre Strong was the competition, I think he might have actually been every down. But like Jerome Ford in some version of the Nick Chubb role and Kareem Hunt in the version of the role he had last year, I think is a reasonable projection. But I still Jerome Ford in the Nick Chubb role is an awesome role, and he's a bit better pass catcher than Nick Chubb also. So yeah. Okay. Couple more. Yeah, like I disagree with this. Sports Poker Guy says it's crazy to spend more than 20 to 30% of your fab on any one player. I think that's the wrong way to think about it. There are only a few times each year you get a spot to get a Kareem Williams or a Puka Nacua or a Jerome Ford, like a guy that can actually be a difference maker for you for the whole year. Otherwise, you end up with a bunch of money left over where you're getting inflated bids on guys like Tank Dell or who I like. But, it's so different than adding someone that can actually be a total league winner. So yeah, just disagree with that.
Yeah, I disagree as well. And again, like it actually makes a big difference, right? If your league allows $0 bids. I know this is really in the weeds and niche to talk about, but if your league allows $0 bids, meaning you can still add like kickers, defenses, flex players in a pinch if some of your guys get injured, there's not that much risk in these shallow leagues of using all your fab. Like you can still make moves for some of these guys on the list that will cost you $0. So again, I think it's, I think it's worth it when we get these studs, Jerome Ford, Puka Nacua, Kyren Williams, like, man, get these guys and then play the waiver wire for cheap for the rest of the season. I think that's a totally viable strategy.
Yeah, you guys can see the exact bid recommendations and Sam's full thoughts on all of these guys in the article. Of course, you do need Draft Kit Pro to see that. Also, the in-season package as well. establishedrun.com/subscribe. All right. Last question here, I think, is a relatively easy one, but someone asked Zach Moss. Now that we have the Kareem Hunt visiting news, Zach Moss or Jerome Ford would still be Jerome Ford for me, but maybe getting a little bit tighter. Sam, what do you think about Zach Moss and Jerome Ford now?
Still a little tighter, but still, I think these are players in different tiers for me.
Yeah.
I would be still very clearly Ford over Moss.
And also, like, it's not crazy to think that Jonathan Taylor can figure it out with the Colts and he comes back in like a few weeks, in a couple weeks, and then you're just stuck with Zach Moss in a really weak role. Oh, a couple people asking about dropping Courtland Sutton. I mean, I get it. I'm not high on Courtland Sutton, but I don't think I'd be dropping him for any of these guys. Sam, any thoughts on dropping Sutton?
Not for any of the wide receivers on the list. Like, again, super shallow league. If you're choosing between Jerome Ford and Courtland Sutton, I'm going with Ford, but I'm still holding him, I think, over the likes of Tank Dell. One last thing, Adam. I'm seeing people like asking about dropping JSN for, like, I think someone asked JSN for Nico Collins. Maybe that's an interesting one to talk through. Curious your thoughts on that.
Oh, I still want to have JSN. I think that JSN's usage has actually been somewhat encouraging. They're playing more 3 wide receiver sets, and he's seeing a really good targets per route run rate. And the more that Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf beat defenses deep, the more JSN will be open underneath. If I needed production right now, obviously it would be Nico, but I assume this is a bench question, and if it's a bench question, it would be JSN for me. What do you think?
Yeah, I maybe think it's a little bit closer than you do, but I think I would still, again, assuming it's a bench question, I like the upside of JSN on your bench over Nico Collins. But that said, hopefully you can drop someone else besides Nico Collins, because he's looking like a great pick so far. But
for sure. All right. That's going to do it for this week 2 waiver show. For more on waivers, you can listen to the team by team that I did with Silva this morning. That will be up later today. And then you can read Sam's article with all the fab recommendations and everything on establishedrun.com right now. We'll be back tomorrow here on YouTube for a live show talking rest of season top 150 for trades, best ball drafts, etc., etc. For Sam, for producer Adam, that's me, for the team that put up these beautiful graphics on YouTube so you guys have something to look at besides our disgusting faces. I am Adam. Good luck, everybody.